When you spend some time thinking about the police, you start to understand it's a kind of problematic institution, you know. When you think about it, the police are common people you're taking out of a society and giving them the authority to implement or execute, to be the executory arm of the law. That whatever the law books say must be done, these are the people that are called to do it. So if you're a police, first off, do you agree with all the laws that you are called to implement? Remember, you are the executory arm of this. So are you in agreement with these laws if you are an officer? And then you are giving these common citizens the power of enforcing the law. And while it should be that they shouldn't act outside of the law, they shouldn't enforce anything that isn't in the law, who is going to stop them? If they are the enforcement arm of the law and they are doing something outside of the law, do we then have another enforcement arm of the law to enforce the law on them? And then who would enforce the law on the other enforcement arm of the law? And would it be a circle of law enforcement? You're understanding the picture I'm painting? So the police are called to enforce the law, but if they break the law, we must have the Police Standards Bureau behind them, and they are called to look after the police and make sure that they don't break the law. But if the Police Standard Bureau breaks the law, who is going to investigate them? Is it the police again who investigates them? Because you can't leave the police to investigate them, because then you're almost sure that some kind of monkey business would end up playing around there. The police would launch an investigation in retaliation against the Police Standard Bureau, and etc., etc., etc. So who investigates the investigators is always the question you end with. And that's kind of where we're going today, because there's an investigation going on into a police shooting that happened recently, and there's an investigation into several different actions that have gone on from the police, and some of the police that are now under investigation are complaining about the tactics that the investigators who are investigating them are using. And I couldn't help but notice the irony in that the police themselves, when they are under investigation, very often complain about the tactics of the investigators. And isn't that telling? Isn't that telling? You understand? Sometimes when we laugh at the people who talking about the police wicked and all, they're too wicked, you know the ever famous lady who at every crime scene shouting that the police too wicked. When we laugh at them, sometimes I think we discount the reality of what the situation is. Sometimes, unless you are in the situation, you may not understand the specific injustices that some people may feel. I don't want to sound necessarily like an advocate for criminals in saying so, but there is an understanding that there are various sides and various nuances in each story. And sometimes even someone who may be a criminal or who may be involved in criminal activity, when they have an encounter with the police, the encounter isn't all above board. And they may, in fact, although they may be a perpetrator of another crime, they may now be a victim of another crime too from the police side. So let's get into it. Let's see what the news says about it. Before we get fully into that, if you haven't clicked like on this video yet, please do click that like button. The more you click the like button, the more the video pops up on other people's YouTube feed and they are able to see it more. It increases the engagement, and the more engagement is the more discussion, and it increases the amount of knowledge we could all crowdsource from each other. The internet is like crowdsourcing knowledge, so let's get to that. All right. Probe into Mova triple police killing at end stage. For anyone who may remember, this was the killing that launched a near Black Lives Matter kind of protest style in Trinidad. Not a near, it launched a Black Lives Matter protest in Trinidad and Tobago for a couple of days. It was quickly quelled because there seemed to be, well, not only in Trinidad, but specifically talking about Trinidad, there seemed to be quite a few different interest groups with their hands in this jar and trying to get their pound of flesh out of it. And I think the multiplicity of interest groups trying to push the movement was one of the things that made it not able to last that long. It decreased the longevity of it. So it wasn't as united and cohesive. A lot of the people who were speaking online were not speaking as the same tone of some of the people in some of these communities, because you were seeing a difference, especially in the class differences. You were seeing a university educated upper middle class kind of tone when you're speaking about those style of protests when you were looking online, and then on the street, those weren't the people that were there. So, and then to compound on that, that would have also been in the early stages of the coronavirus whole thing, so the pandemic. So it wasn't a good idea also to be out on the streets for quite that period of time. The main investigator assigned to probe the police killing of 3 men in Second Caledonia, Mova, which occurred just over a year ago, began tying up loose ends on Friday and questioned some of the officers who were on the scene that day. Sunday Newsday understands that Abbott, who has been liaising with the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, intends to seek further advice at the conclusion of the interviews before a determination is made on the evidence and possible criminal charges. Abbott had been handpicked by Deputy Commissioner of Police McDonald Jacob, who is in charge of intelligence and investigations, to probe the June 27, 2020 incident whether Joel Jacobs, Noel Diamond, and Israel Moses Clinton were intercepted by a joint team of 18 officers assigned to the Interagency Task Force and the Guard and Emergency Branch at Schumann Drive. Oddly, Abbott was allowed to proceed on leave after he was selected to probe the matter and began his task about a month after the incident. Okay, that's interesting. 7 of the officers who fired their weapons that day were suspended from active duty following a recommendation by the Police Complaints Authority, and 11 others were assigned to desk duty by Commissioner of Police Gary Griffith. The shooting incident was captured on CCTV cameras from a nearby home, and footage leaked on social media hours after the incident. The footage seemed to contradict the police account that one of the men pulled a weapon on the officers, prompting them to return fire. It ignited a wave of protests for 3 days in several communities across the country, including the capital city. It also prompted the Prime Minister to appoint a committee headed by psychologist Anthony Watkins to get to the root of some of the problems associated with so-called hotspot communities and their relationship with the police. Now, I'm interested to find out what was the conclusion of that matter. Does anyone know where this report by the psychologist Anthony Watkins can be found? I'll be very interested in reading it as to what is the root of some of the problems associated with the hotspot communities and their relationship with the police. Now, I am not a psychologist. I like the field of psychology. I do read quite a bit of psychology, but I'm not a psychologist. But I'm not sure if a psychologist was needed to find that conclusion. Couldn't you ask the people? A lot of them are very willing to offer you very, very vivid explanations and very raw explanations as to why they don't like the police. And having been a resident of Trinidad all my life and knowing quite a few people, and in fact residing in some hotspot communities myself occasionally, you could know there is a friction between the police and the communities, because okay, you understand that the police are moving in this community and they have a worry for danger, but then the people within this community feel like they would be targeted because they are known to be part of this community. There's a stigma, there's that friction in between them. It's understood, it's known for quite some time. And very often, something I notice about what they may call hotspot communities or lower income communities, really and truly, that it's something that is nearly symptomatic. Very often when you're talking about problematic communities, you're also talking about more economically disadvantaged communities. And something that you notice there is that there's a natural tendency towards a more collectiveness, because for one, it's a matter of necessity. If you're already in a more disadvantaged economically disadvantaged position, it would be of more benefit to you to come together, to pool your resources and get stronger as a unit. Two is better than one, that idea. So very often you would have some close-knitness in the community, and on the negative side that leads towards gangs, and then on the police side, we already trained the officers, something that I'm not sure how we are going to escape. It's a problem in nearly everywhere that there is a police service, that you train the police service to treat each other nearly like they are a brotherhood, they are a gang themselves. So what that causes is protection of the weaker units. And sometimes the weaker units in this case may literally be the corrupt units. So when you have the police as a unified gang of sorts, a brotherhood, and then you have a hotspot community as a unified group or more unified group, even with some of the negative aspects there, and you have these two groups that seem to be in opposition to each other, and one group holds all the power and one group doesn't. So whenever there's a wrong to be happened, it always feels like the wrong happens going one direction, and people who feel like they are disadvantaged over and over and over, they don't like it. I'm not sure if that would be the conclusion that the psychologist comes to, but I find that seems like a pretty obvious conclusion to me, at least. And even in this case, to find the reason, I don't think the reason is as difficult a thing to find as a solution. The reasons are multiple. There are many different reasons, and I think if you ask anyone, they may be able to give you at least one reason. The problem is finding a solution, and personally, one of the solutions I could think of is trying to model our police service in a way that it at all turns seems less advantageous on the citizens. Because when you look over in the US and you hear many people speak about the origins of the police as a racist force to stop the slaves from getting away, all of it is not true. But there is a certain aspect of truth to it, that many police services and many of the law enforcement services the origins of it were in a bit of an oppressive nature. It was more of a top-down, the owners, the masters, the royals, whoever the authorities in the society may be. These are the people in charge of making sure that their decrees are executed. But in a society like ours, where it's supposed to be run as the consent of the governed, it's supposed to be that the police serve the citizenry. And for me, I think if you want to solve the friction that we feel in between the police and the citizens, that's something that you want to happen. You want people to feel more like these police are in my service. And this is not something that would help that. 75,000 in penalties issued in Port of Spain lockdown. 4 suspected criminals were arrested and 108 people fined, almost half for offences relating to face masks during a police exercise in Port of Spain on Thursday. Now, I am not one of those people who agree that the law is the law. The statement, the law is obviously a true statement. Okay, the law is the law. Wow. That tells you I was born in the 90s. I use the term the. Yes, the law is the law, true. But when I see something like this past week, I saw they arrested a man in Carenage for taking out garbage after the curfew. And I understand it's the law. But what is the reason for the law? That should be the core argument here. The law isn't there just to make us jump through hoops. The law isn't a test of how obedient the citizens are. That's not what we want laws for. The laws aren't just like eating with the knife in the left hand and the fork in the right hand and the manner in which you're doing it. Just a matter of showing how technically proficient you are at these fine etiquettes. The laws are meant to make a functional society. So someone contravening the law is supposed to be punished because they are making it more difficult for society to run properly. And I think intention should also have some part to play in that. So when this man went out to put the garbage after the curfew hours went, was it his intention to risk the health of the nation? Because that was the purpose of this curfew. Was it his intention to do that? So why would you knot him up in our already tied up judicial system where everyone always complains there are way too many cases? You're going to throw someone else in there to go through there, and he's already surely a member of the lower classes in Trinidad, and you're going to strip him of some more money, strip him of some more days of work, and strip him of some dignity because you plaster his face all over the social media because he went to put garbage out after the curfew hours. Really? So couldn't it have been said that the police saw him and said, hey brother, I will carry the garbage for you. In fact, we will drop you back to your residence and you stay inside. Make sure, don't get in trouble. Don't get yourself in trouble. Doesn't that make more sense to you? And when you give in this exercise they shut down Port of Spain. I saw the Trini driver over on TikTok was complaining about this. As soon as you reopen the country, you ambush the citizens with roadblocks all over the capital, gridlocking the capital in traffic and catching anyone you can off guard. Are you trying to raise funds for the government, or are we trying to make our country run properly? Because this isn't how you do it. This is how you aggravate your citizens. This isn't how you rectify the relationship. So Prime Minister Dr. Rowley, the psychologist that you hired to find out what was the cause for this friction in between the citizens and the police, well, they are doing it right now. This is the cause for this friction. We do not feel like this police service is working for us if it feels like they are working to raise funds for the government by fleecing the population. Why are you attempting to get money from people not wearing masks? The purpose of the mask wearing is to save the country in a health crisis, to do a roadblock and go car to car searching to see if anyone is wearing their mask properly, to extract money from them, isn't helping the country gain its health back. And the final part in this, right before I end off, to crown off all of this, the interesting part, remember, I'll leave the link to these articles in the description. Well, I hope I get to that. An attorney for a cop under probe once police bureau investigated. This attorney is representing the police, one of the police charged with the missing vehicles. Yes, some police vehicles were stolen, and this is one of the police that has been charged with this. And his attorney is complaining about the manner in which the police raided his home and stopped his wife, I believe it was, on the road and questioned them without his knowledge, etc., etc., etc. And I just find the whole thing interesting that even the police themselves, when they are on the other side of police investigations, understand that the manner in which the police service treats the civilians oftentimes doesn't increase the trust and build the relationship between the two. So I think if you're looking to cure that relationship, maybe the psychologist doing the study maybe somewhere further down the road, and just improving the community and interpersonal relations of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service may actually work much better in the short term. Tell me, what do you think? Don't forget to drop that comment if you have a comment there, and click like if you haven't done that, and do subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet, and I'll see you tomorrow for the next video.
And you feel the music rising with the time.